I'm Savannah, and today we're going to be talking about whether you should be fined for insulting a police officer and the affordable housing we're going to be getting in 15 to 20 years, maybe.
I'm Chris, and this week we'll be talking to one of 3 Quebecers who was detained and tortured by the Israeli military during a humanitarian mission to Gaza last month. Afterwards, we'll be talking about the new Liberal leader, Charles Milliard. Welcome to The Week Is Rover. Our guest today was one of 3 Quebecers abducted, beaten, and imprisoned by the Israeli military last month for his involvement with the global Flotilla. Ehab Lotayef and over 400 activists were on a mission to deliver aid to Gaza when Israel's Navy seized their vessels in international waters. They were then arrested, detained, and subjected to a litany of abuse. At least 67 of the detainees were later hospitalized for injuries that include broken ribs, broken arms, broken legs, and internal bleeding. There are reports of activists being stripped naked and forced into a cold prison cell, as well as multiple reports of detainees being sexually assaulted.
I was dragged into a darkened container ship on a prison boat. I was sexually assaulted.
I can't think of how many times I was punched and kicked in the face.
He said, "You're too old to be alive. You need to die."
Ehab himself was stabbed by a soldier while handing out water bottles to the other detainees. Since returning from the flotilla, Ehab has been recovering from his injuries, but was kind enough to join us this afternoon. Ehab is a longtime human rights activist, but he's also a poet and author of the book To Love a Palestinian Woman. We're grateful he could be on the show today. How did you prepare for this trip, knowing what was going to be on the other side?
Can I start by saying we did not know that it's going to be that violent, that punishing, that torturous from the beginning. That was beyond our expectations, really. I have participated in my first flotilla and my first imprisonment in Israel 15 years ago, 2011. Then it was a year after the Mavi Marmara, and the Israelis wanted to improve their image, so they were now I could say they were very nice to us. We knew year after year, and especially in the last 3 years, that Israel is becoming more crazy, doesn't care anymore about its image. So we expected the worst, but this was worse than the worst expected. We've seen, for example, the way the Itamar Ben-Gvir treated the previous flotilla in the fall of 2025. And we said, well, that's bad, we should be prepared for that. But if I can talk about myself, and I think this kind of question needs to be directed to each individual, because I guess it differs from individual to individual. But I really found myself very comfortably in the place that no matter what they do to my body, they're not going to get to my soul, they're not going to get to my heart, they're not going to get to my mind. And strangely enough, as somebody who never had experienced violence as an adult, I mean, of course, as a teenager, we all experience violence somehow. But as an adult, I've never experienced really harsh violence in any way, nor did I inflict it on anybody. So I was away from that, from that environment. But I was surprised how I managed really to practice what I trained for. And I really found myself under the worst conditions of body pain, and which I could have gone much worse. Of course, there is no limit to how far that can go, but I found myself under control. So to try to answer your question directly, we trained by trying to be really peaceful in the face of the most violent actions from the other side, and we did some role playing.
That's what they I remember during the civil rights movement in the United States. That's what they would do, right? You would have these black Americans who would go to the Woolworth counter that was segregated, and they would get yelled at. And the challenge is you have to just maintain your peaceful disposition, but ahead of these actions, they would train at just being yelled at and berated. And so you were doing that.
Yes, we did.
Wow.
We did. And the last session of that we did was in Sicily, just before we launched. And we did it, or those who were not sailing did it to us by surprise as well once. Yeah. And they just came to us with balaclavas, and
They were really rough.
and that was the last lesson, because I realized at that point that if you decide to resist and then they break you, you would feel bad. But if you decide from the beginning that I won't resist, then there's nothing for them to they can't conquer you.
Yeah.
And that really worked.
I had heard, I've read about this a lot, and I'd heard that it was like the louder you screamed, the more they would hit you. Like the ones who just didn't make much of a fuss, they just got bored.
Yeah.
The soldiers got bored.
Yeah.
Something really upsetting that has happened. Like, I know, we saw this happen before. And then when your group left, I remember seeing your picture, and it was the first time that I knew someone. Like, I know who you are. I've seen you. We've met before.
Yeah.
You've always been very kind. As I said earlier, you like smiled to my daughter at a protest, and I really appreciated that. And to see someone and to hear like, okay, well, that we don't hear from him anymore. Like, I got worried. I called some friends of yours, and I heard about what a nice guy you are. I mean, I knew that, but I heard like you're gentle, it wouldn't hurt a fly, really giving and principled person. And one of the things that really was crushing is after you got out and I shared your story. This is a long question, but I think you might appreciate it. There was I've been talking to this guy who's a Zionist. We get along on a lot of things, but we really don't on this issue.
Yeah.
And he said about what you went out and there's the wound on your hand, there's the broken ribs, and he said, well, this all lies. And it hurts so much because it's like, no, why are we denying this person's experience? And then the more I look into it, the more there are these videos that deconstruct what you said, the size of your bandage, the way you were moving, saying, oh, it doesn't look like he has broken ribs. How is it to face that level of denialism when you're returning? Because you've experienced it.
Yeah. Let me first say, just for the record, that I thought I had broken ribs and a collapsed lung. I did not have broken ribs, but my whole rib cage is swollen, and we're now like 3 weeks after the beating, and it's still painful. The stab in my hand is very, very true, and it is the only knife wound in the whole flotilla. And there's a reason for that. We might get into why I particularly was stabbed. But the denial is horrible. And on my Facebook page, for example, you see when I put the picture that thanks to Itmar Ben Gvir, he's the one who published it. We would not have had source to it if they didn't. And I showed how we were treated and how the Balaklava soldiers are on top with their machine guns pointing at us. And there were also soldiers on our level smacking anybody on the head who didn't have his head down. You realize that, again, it's like we were talking about the punishment and how to get through it. It's also to understand where those Zionists, the pro-Israel lobby, where their mindset is. Their only escape, if they have any humanity in them, their only escape is to convince themselves that these are lies.
Yeah.
Because if they don't do that, their humanity would get to them. And then they won't be able to defend Israel anymore. So it's such a complex situation that really needs you to understand the other side. But with all calmness and confidence, I tell anybody and everybody what happened did happen. And that only shows that this is not like acting like a state anymore. It's acting like a band of terrorists. And the fact that you wear a uniform doesn't make you not a terrorist.
Yeah.
The act that you have a land and you call it a state doesn't make you immune from being a terrorist entity.
Yeah, the fact that you buy your weapons directly from Lockheed Martin doesn't mean that.
Exactly. So it just makes you try more to understand how to tackle the issue, but it doesn't make me feel like sorry for myself that I'm not being believed or anything of the sort.
There was this. I found this really interesting. There was an interview with you in the Canadian Jewish News a couple of years back about a friend. You had these friendships with some Zionists, and you guys would meet and discuss your differences. And October 7th really strained that.
Yes.
But you managed to kind of come back and find common ground.
With a few.
Yeah.
With a very small few. Because after October 7th, there are people who shut you out 100% and sent you a few insults and blocked you.
Yeah.
And those were, I would say, at least 50% of those who were involved, I was involved with in some sort of dialogue or the other. There are people from the Jewish community who I stood shoulder to shoulder with against Bill 21, for example.
Yeah.
And they would come whenever I invite them to an action or whatever. And then October 7th happens, and all of a sudden, I am a terrorist. I am pro-Hamas. I want to destroy Israel. And it goes like, off the rails right away.
Yeah. But there were some that you were able to repair, some of these relationships.
Absolutely.
And how do you, like, I'm saying this out of genuine curiosity because I too have lost a lot of friends in the community, and I don't know what's going to happen next, but I see what happened. Like, I see that you were able to repair it, and I think it's like, especially given everything you've been through, and given, like, you have a personal connection to Palestine. You were raised in Egypt, but I think your wife was your wife is Palestinian.
My first wife was
your first wife was Palestinian.
Yes.
And you, and yet still you can repair those relationships. How do you do that?
Let's look at human relations in the right way. I think it takes two to repair. It takes one to damage.
Yeah.
And there is proverbs about accidents and stuff, and no, it takes one to make an accident. It takes two to avoid the accident.
Yeah.
And so with the ones that the relationship was repaired and we started to understand each other after October 7th, it took both sides. It took both sides to try to think that person, I know him or her well enough that they can't be what I imagined on October 8th.
Yeah.
And it was a road. It was a long road. Nothing happened overnight. But I have to say as well that October 7th didn't break my relationship with everybody and anybody who identifies with Israel.
Yeah.
Some people understood that trying to explain October 7th doesn't mean condoning October 7th. And also, till today, we continue to say October 7th is not a starting point. It did not come out of vacuum. And if we all want to understand the reality of the world we're living in, we have to accept that.
Yeah. No, it's you can't prevent something if you don't understand why it happened, right?
Yeah.
And I remember going back to the Stephen Harper days when I think Justin Trudeau said we have to understand the root causes of terrorism, and that was used against him again and again.
Yeah.
But it's actually a very thoughtful way of looking at it.
Yes.
We should understand
Yes.
the root causes of violence.
Yes, and then Justin Trudeau comes and says, "I'm a Zionist."
Yeah.
which is
yeah. He's in the political wilderness now, enjoying his life with a pop star.
Yes.
So, guy, guess there are worse places to retire. I had heard that, we all heard our government, our prime minister, condemn Ben Gvir and condemn that video. But on the ground, did you really feel supported by your government when you were released?
I didn't feel supported by my government while I was there, which was the crucial time to feel supported, because we, different from 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, we were attacked live on TV, on our YouTube channels at least.
Yeah. In international waters.
In international waters. But the all governments in the West knew this was happening. All governments in the world knew that how harsh the previous flotilla was dealt with. And through Ben Gvir this time, they knew before I reached the shores of Israel, before I was in Ashdod, the government of Canada and all Western governments knew what was happening, because that video was released while we were still on the boat, while I was still on the boat. So because there were two prisoner boats. So one of them had reached shore and Ben Gvir had started his harassment and his punishment to people, and we were still on the boat. So the government of Canada knew that this was happening while it was happening. Now, why weren't there Canadian consular assistants at least waiting for us in Ashdod is a failure by the Canadian government. We had connections with Adala, an Israeli, Palestinian Israeli human rights law firm, and we had their lawyers there. And when I asked one of the lawyers, where are the Canadian consular services to stand with us while we're accused of entering Israel illegally, which is the funniest accusation that can happen to people abducted from international waters, really. Yeah. She said, they may see you tomorrow morning. That was that's what she knew, the Adala lawyer. So no, I'm not satisfied at all with what Canada is doing. I met a couple of MPs who said, we were very worried about you.
Yeah. Not worried enough to do something.
And exactly. And one of them is in the government, not just an MP. And he said that. And I was like, I really was dumbstruck. I couldn't even say, so what did you do about it? You're not just a backbencher MP. You're in the government. Yeah. You can call your counterpart in Israel real time and say even, I mean, I don't care about myself, but you could even say, I'm concerned about this guy who I know, that's not what I'm asking for, but I'm just saying he could have done that, but they did nothing. And then what Mark Carney did, and there is a question that we have all to ask ourselves, why did Mark Carney talk to the Israeli president, which is a ceremonial role? Why didn't he talk to Benjamin Netanyahu, who is his counterpart? Did Netanyahu refuse to talk to him? It was pathetic. And then the statements issued by both offices of both Carney and the Israeli president, there is slight difference between the two statements, but if you put them together, like about 5% is talking about what happened to us, and the other 90%, 95% is talking about how we love each other and support each other as two countries and whatever. So no, I'm not satisfied, and we're still demanding and waiting for an answer from the office of Mark Carney, from the office of Anita Anand, to our request to meet. They need to
won't even meet you.
They didn't say no yet.
Okay.
But all the signs that we are saying say no. I mean, and
they're not warmly embracing the
No. We didn't get any like positive answer or semi-positive or hopeful answer till this point, although that letter was sent already over a week ago.
The lobby has a ton of influence nationally, but locally they have influence too. We reported a couple of weeks back about how one of the mayor's main fundraisers works for CJ. He's the regional director for CJ PAC.
Yes.
Just the other day at City Hall, during I think the Ville Marie Borough Council meeting, Leslie Roberts, who was he went on a paid reporting trip to Israel and spread disinformation, of course, almost like on behalf of the Israeli government.
Yeah.
He was asked to condemn Itamar Ben-Gvir. It's a bit of a long clip, but I think maybe Justin could show us.
Mr. Roberts, since you refused to answer the question of my colleague who was here earlier, I'd like to give you one more opportunity to condemn a renowned international criminal who was recognized, Ben-Gvir.
I think the answer has been said already. This is my job is municipal, and that's what I do, and that's the answer I have for you.
He just can't bring himself.
No.
He wants to condemn the people who hanged Ben-Gvir in effigy by saying, look, this is anti-Semitic, even though they were also hanging Trump and Netanyahu. But he will not condemn the person who is passing a law that would only apply to hanging Palestinians, and who would be sanctioned, who is being sanctioned by Canada, and who would be arrested if he came to Canada.
Yes.
That guy they can't condemn, but the protesters in the streets who go a little too far, those guys, they're getting investigated by the police.
Yeah. And as someone who was tortured recently by Ben-Gvir's apparatus, I would always give the benefit of the doubt, and I have been doing that for decades now, pushing against this mix between anti-Semitism and criticism of Israel and Israeli actions and politics. And this is another thing that's really, I mean, you asked me about when will things change. And this is something as well that I don't know when will it change. When will we as a society, even those who who write, even those who run think tanks would be able to say it clearly, that there is a big difference between anti-Semitism, which is hating somebody because he is Jewish or because he comes from a certain lineage, compared to criticizing and condemning and attacking and even swearing at a politician because of what he is doing as a politician, or a country because what it's doing as a country. That's also, this confusion is not helping us reach a position that is
We're not working towards a solution.
Yeah, I think this is one of the things we need to resolve.
Yeah.
I mean, this is one of the battles we need to win to be able to win the war.
And I mean, in fairness, there are also figures like Nick Fuentes, figures on the right who are embracing this anti-Israel thing, but not because of any kind of sympathy for the Palestinians. It is out of what appears to be an overt feeling of anti-Semitism. And that is dangerous, but it seems mostly to be coming from the right. And yet we don't hear this from our politicians.
And I don't at all disagree that anti-Semitism exists. I don't at all disagree that all peoples could be subjected to hate because of who they are, not because of what they do. That happens everywhere, and it's unfortunately, I am also in the forefront of condemning my own people meaning like culturally or religiously or ethnically, when I see them crossing the line. And because there is a lot of misunderstanding also in conflating these things together in many communities.
To me, one of the things that's frustrating is, like, you'll hear someone like Netanyahu make it so that Israel and Judaism are the same thing. So if you criticize one, you're criticizing the other. But if you're proud of one, you're proud of the other. So like, to some people, the two are indistinguishable. So they will start to say, not Israel is doing this, but the Jews are doing this.
Yes.
And that is extremely dangerous.
Yeah. And he wants it to be that way because he benefits from that.
It feeds into that
Absolutely.
the feedback loop.
Absolutely.
I want to end on a slightly less horrible note. I read some of your poetry the other day. Do you mind if I read some of it to you?
Please.
Okay, you wrote a book called When You Love a Palestinian Woman, and there's a couple of excerpts from one of these poems that I absolutely love. When you love a Palestinian woman, your heart is tuned to the beat of a heart that can never forget. When you love a Palestinian woman, you love every wave that kisses the shores of her land, every olive tree in Galilee, every particle of salt in the Dead Sea. When you love a Palestinian woman, you love a spirit that inherited the will to stand, and eyes that terrify guards at checkpoints. I love that line. In a way no man can. How can any man love but a Palestinian woman? I don't know how you're going to respond to that, but I just want to say that I read it and I was absolutely charmed by it, and thank you for contributing that.
The seed of that poem came when I was sitting in the Hesha refugee camp in the West Bank, or close to the camp. I don't remember if it was somebody who was in the camp or from the village next door. And she said that I'm taking care of the 7 kids. I am also a community organizer. And she was a woman in her 50s, I guess, or something like that. Very powerful, you know. She says that the men go and do an open action, whether it's a demonstration or an armed resistance or whatever, and then they're taken to jail. And she said it, I'm not minimizing what they did or the punishment they're subjected to, but the burden of continuity falls on my shoulder, on her shoulder.
Yeah.
And so that's where the strength of the Palestinian women, who are not jailed at the same percentage at all compared to the men in the West Bank. Let's talk about the West Bank here. And they have the burden of carrying the community, the society, the movement.
It falls apart without them.
And also the part about checkpoint guards is also true, because I mean, we as humans at the end of the day tend to combat violence with violence. So it is easier for the checkpoint guard to push somebody who's trying to say, but when a woman is looking at them in the eye, it is really more difficult. It's more
Strike at their
terrifying.
sense of humanity.
Yes.
And you
Yes.
find it, and you
Yes.
can see that human being in there.
Yeah.
You can see a trace of shame
Yeah,
or something.
absolutely.
Whereas maybe men would not get that
No.
out of the
No.
guards. They would
No.
just get a beating.
And you know that brings us 360 degrees maybe to where we started about how I managed or how we managed on this flotilla. And it was really a huge success in that aspect, that we did not give them the chance to be more violent against us, because there was only, when people told me before I leave, take care, I always said, the maximum I can do is what I can do, but my safety depends on the foolishness of the most foolish of the Israelis that will deal with me. Yeah. I can't control my safety. I can only control myself. But I guess with controlling myself, with controlling ourselves, we managed to disarm them to a certain extent. But they were intent on torture and violence. They were intent on teaching us a lesson. But I guess, strangely enough, as we came back, so many people are saying, when is the next flotilla?
Yeah. Thank you for coming back. And thank you for taking the time to sit down with us and talk to us about this. I can't imagine it's easy, but I really appreciate that you took the time to do it. Thank you so much, Ehab.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Reporting by the Journal de Montréal has revealed an explosion of property repossessions brought to Quebec's Housing Tribunal. Since 2020, almost 14,000 landlords have taken tenants to the tribunal, the TAL, seeking an eviction on the grounds that either they or an immediate family member would occupy the unit. That's more repossession cases in the last 5 years than in the 10 years before that, according to the Journal de Montréal. And these are just the repossession cases that were brought before the TAL, so the true number is unknown. The number of fraudulent repossessions is also unknown, but a few such cases have come up in media reports this week. Quebec has had a 3-year moratorium on evictions since 2024, but only for evictions due to change in use, subdivisions, or expansions, not repossessions. The RECLAC, a tenant advocacy organization grouping together the province's housing committees, is calling for the moratorium to be renewed after it expires in 2027 and for it to include evictions caused by repossessions. Meanwhile, a new report on the CAQ government's housing policies found that program reforms have made it more expensive to build subsidized housing, which has led to smaller units being built and little impact for housing affordability in the short term. In 2022, the CAQ replaced the provincial program that funded social and community housing construction with a new program that shifted the focus to affordable housing construction, which is tied to market costs rather than tenants' income. Now, 4 years later, we're seeing the impacts of that change. Most of what's built through this quote-unquote affordable housing program isn't affordable for low-income Quebecers, the report found. In fact, the government and developers are betting that since these units are built and managed by nonprofit organizations, the rents will increase more slowly than the private market and become affordable in 15 to 20 years. The report's authors, however, aren't so certain that's a safe bet.
Are you excited about affordable housing in 15 to 20 years?
Yeah. So this is an idea called deferred affordability. And
it's a deferred solution.
That's literally what it's called, abordabilité différée. And this is like the kind of the big concept that the provincial government is leaning on in its provincial housing strategy that the CAQ put forward. I want to say in 2022, it might be 2024. But and this is like most of these units that are being built through this program will not be affordable when they're delivered.
So if you're like a single mom with 2 kids and you're struggling, like your kids will have to basically be graduated from high school before you can get. Yeah. Wow.
And then, but also, these units will probably be already occupied when. Yeah. So you know what I mean? Yeah. Like it doesn't. And so basically, what this report found is that the programs that the CAQ has put in place have little to no impact for the short term. Which it's great that maybe. And maybe that's the thing. Maybe we'll have affordable units in 15 to 20 years. Most of the units will not be affordable when they're delivered. Yeah.
I guess this is what happens when you elect a government that spent its first 4 years in office denying there was a housing crisis, despite massive evidence that there was.
Yeah.
And that during their second term, the housing minister for a while was someone who, there were comparisons to Marie Antoinette, just let them eat cake. She was asked, what is the solution for people who can't afford rent increases? They should invest in real estate.
Yeah.
I suppose that's like this is widely seen as like the landlord landlord government.
Mm-hmm. Well, so when they created this new program, the Programme d'Habitation Abordable Québec, the FAQ, we call it for short, it was to come replace Accès Logis. Accès Logis was a one-stop shop to get funding, to have social housing projects built, and also purpose housing, like the purpose-built housing, housing for people who are leaving homelessness, housing for women leaving violent situations, stuff like that, and the reason Accès Logis was not perfect, but it did fund, I think, like 41,000 units in Quebec in its existence. They replaced it with the FAQ, and the point of the FAQ was to, stop building social housing and to get the private sector more involved in building affordable housing. Yeah. Affordable is
always ends well, right? The private sector gets involved. And
yes.
They have no ulterior motives.
And I think that people kind of are aware of this, but it bears repeating that affordable housing is a misnomer, right?
Yeah.
Because when the reason we call it affordable housing is that it's tied to the market. It's worth a certain percentage of the going rate in the market.
And like the market in the last 10 years has doubled.
Yeah.
Our salaries haven't doubled, right? Our services haven't doubled,
exactly.
But the market has doubled.
So when you tie affordability to the market and the market is unaffordable, you're not actually guaranteeing affordability. That's kind of the problem that we have here.
They can die slower, but you're not going to thrive.
Yeah. And so the point of this was to have more private funding and less state funding,
to
right?
lessen the burden of the state.
Yeah, exactly.
But then you could also make the argument that, if we're spending so much percentage of our income on rent, then we're not fueling the economy by buying shit we don't need. So, or buying stuff with disposable income. So it kind of just defeats itself, I think. I'm not an expert.
Yeah.
You were talking about repossessions earlier at the TAL. So a repossession is when it's like one of the only ways you can evict someone now is other than for non-compliance with rent and whatever, is to say my uncle needs a place or my dad needs a place to stay.
Yeah. Immediate family member.
Yeah. So it has to be a child or a parent or maybe a sibling. But this is not happening. Like, this is not what a lot of these are fraudulent. Can you explain some of what you've seen?
Yeah, I wish that we had numbers. Unfortunately, we don't, but we do, anecdotally, I've certainly heard it before. And then after the Journal de Montréal report came out, there's been a few stories in the media. There was one in the Journal de Montréal that was interesting, and it was like a family 2 years ago, a couple and their daughter. They were evicted from their home that they had lived in for 10 years. And the reason that was given by the landlord was that his daughter was going to live in the unit. So it was a repossession. 10 days after they moved out, they saw the unit listed, advertised as available for rent for $500 higher rent than they were paying. So they were able to take their landlord to the TAL, and the TAL ruled in their favor. That landlord paid $17,000 in a fine. And so this is a case where, the tenants were able to, you're able to get compensation. You don't get the right to return to your unit. But, in these situations, the onus is on the tenant to prove that the repossession was fraudulent. In this case, it was very apparent, right? They had the proof. Obviously, the daughter was not living in the unit if it's advertised as available for rent.
If you're going to lie, be a little more subtle about it, okay?
Yeah,
wait 2 months instead of one.
Exactly. This one was
10
very...
10 days, wait 11 days.
It was very blatant, but a lot of them, I would say, probably most of them are not, so it's probably a lot more subtle and a lot harder for a tenant to prove, and the onus is on the tenant.
Well, look, I was in a situation where my landlord asked us for an illegal security deposit. We were desperate to find a place at the time. We had a young kid, and we still do. And so you give the security deposit thinking I'll get it back. And of course, when I moved, not getting it back, yay, thank you so much, Mr. Landlord. And you are so swamped by life, and you're thinking is it worth it? Is it worth the aggravation? Do I want to go fight the guy in court? And I didn't think I was going to do this, but I let it slide. I thought it's not worth it. I have too much on my plate. I don't want to fight it. And I think most people, or a lot of people, are in that situation. And then the government knows this. And they kind of let it happen because, again, it lowers the burden of the state. We don't have to do as much. We don't have to get as involved. And ultimately, are we serving the people or are we serving the landlords? And I think we have long served the landlords.
Yeah. I mean, so who unfortunately tends to vote in elections? It tends to be property owners.
Yeah.
People who are university educated. People who, are landlords, and not people who live in social housing.
Yeah.
It tends to be, right?
Well, it's extremely aggravating.
Yeah, no, for sure. And, we talk about in Quebec having rent control and having good laws to protect tenants, which is true, actually. Like,
in theory.
Yeah, yes. Like, you compare it to Ontario, and yes, the laws are better. The big problem for tenants, it's a problem for tenants, it's not a problem for landlords, is that there is like little
almost
to
no enforcement.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yay.
So it is very, very easy for, a fraudulent repossession to be done without any repercussions for the landlord. Same thing with raising the rent above what is allowed. The case that I was talking about, in the reporting, it notes that in the new tenant's lease, the Section G of the lease was not filled out. Section G of a lease is what our rent control measures rest on, right? It's the place in the lease.
You could argue it's the most important section of the lease.
For enforcing rent control, certainly, absolutely. And it's the part where the landlord has to write the lowest rent that was paid for that unit in the previous 12 months. So that landlord had not filled out the lease, the Section G of the lease, right? And that's the thing. It's very easy to not fill it out. It's very easy to fill it out with a not the real number, right?
Yeah.
Technically speaking, tenants can go to the TAL and fight it if they find out that it's not the case. But,
the onus is on them.
Yeah, and there's a reason why tenants don't want to, because there's a lot of discrimination against tenants who go to the TAL, right? It's harder to find another place after.
I think I'll wrap this with one thought, and it's that we can do rent subsidies, which are really just a way of paying landlord with taxpayers' money, or we can do social housing. And I think social housing generally is, that's really the only option to create consistent, affordable housing. Thank you so much. For a time, Charles Milliard's best asset in Quebec politics was that almost no one knew who he was. The Liberal leader took over the reins last winter as his party was embroiled in yet another political scandal involving cash in envelopes. Milliard's predecessor, Pablo Rodriguez, resigned in December after his camp was accused of giving party members money in exchange for support in the Liberal leadership race. And while there's no proof Rodriguez personally knew of the alleged scheme, his resignation paved the way for Milliard's acclamation as party leader. Just months ahead of the provincial election, Milliard entered a race where most candidates are widely disliked. In a La Presse poll that asked voters who would be the best premier, Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon was number one, with 25% of respondents supporting the PQ leader. Who was the number two choice? None of the above. Another way of reading the poll is that 76% of Quebecers don't think PSPP is a good choice for premier. And while Milliard placed fourth in the poll behind none of the above and CAQ leader Christine Fréchette, he isn't as disliked as most of his political opponents. Some 47% of Quebecers have an unfavorable view of PSPP, according to a Palace data poll released last month. That same poll found Conservative leader Éric Duhaim's unfavorability at a staggering 56%. But aside from not being PSPP or Éric Duhaim, what does Milliard bring to the table? Stop me if you've heard this one before. Milliard said he's going to build a multi-billion-dollar bridge between Quebec City and Lévis by partnering with the private sector. This, despite no studies showing the bridge is necessary and 2 failed attempts by the CAQ to launch the project. And it's not like public-private partnerships are a model of success in this province. The MUHC Super Hospital went way over budget and was literally flooded by a river of shit after opening in 2015. One of the masterminds of that project, Arthur Porter, died in a Panamanian jail after trying to flee corruption charges in Quebec.
Arthur Porter seemed a shadow of his former self. Paraded through the parking lot for cameras by Panamanian police, he did not speak, but acknowledged this question.
Do you expect to fight extradition, sir?
Porter is facing numerous charges, including fraud and money laundering, linked to the handing out of the contract to build a Montreal mega hospital.
For the record, Porter was a well-known Liberal donor. Now, this is just one election promise, but the more you look into Milliard's platform, the more it reminds you of the same old Liberals.
So Milliard launched his campaign with a promise to invest in schools and hospitals. So what's his plan for education?
Well, he wants to hold what he called an État généraux, like a general assembly that focuses on the education system in Quebec. It would be the first time in 30 years that a premier has done this. But he's also said that he will not change what we call in Quebec le système à trois vitesses, the three-speed system. The education system is a disaster. Only 15% of kids who go through Quebec's public school system end up in university. The Quebec's Conseil d'éducation supérieure has called our system the most unequal, uneven, undemocratic system in Canada. The problem is you can't fix that without addressing like a fundamental inequity within the system. We in Quebec, we're one of the only provinces that heavily subsidizes private school and another kind of school that we call a programme particulier. So like a school that specializes in basketball or a school that specializes in theater. These get public funding as well. What ends up happening is all of the kids who can't afford to go to private school or who don't have a basketball-like genius skill that they can end up in this programme particulier, they end up in the public system where there are a ton of special needs kids, where there are a lot of kids for whom French isn't their first language, and where the dropout rate is abysmal, one of the worst in Canada. So like it sounds, I think, to a lot of people as though he is making a promise he can't deliver on. Like, yeah, you can have a meeting about it, but if you don't change this fundamental inequity, we're screwed.
All right, yeah.
Yeah, it's not good. No, it's bad. It's very bad.
And the système à trois vitesses has been kind of brought up as being a very problematic issue. I think Québec solidaire is calling for it to be removed.
Nobody who's ever come within like an inch of power in Quebec has like actually changed the system. The system really started to fall apart under the Liberals, under Jean Charest in the early 2000s, when he took these schools for kids with special needs and emptied them out into the public system. And he said, we will provide you with more resources to help these kids who have learning disabilities. That never happened. So what started off as a good idea of like, hey, mainstreaming these kids at a public school will have exposure to kids with special needs and we'll all learn together. What ended up happening is instead we're kind of warehousing all these kids. And like if you're poor in Quebec, your odds of getting out of poverty through education are garbage. And I don't see that changing unless, again, we do this very difficult thing and pull a ton of money out of the private system and put it back into the public system. There are certain movements. There's a lobby group in Quebec City that's working on kind of attacking this problem. But other than Québec solidaire, which is a distant fourth or fifth in the polls, there's not a ton of support for it politically.
For removing it.
Yeah. People in theory want this, but then the parties also know that it would be difficult, politically costly, and so they're not going to do anything about it. So, if your kid's in school and you can't afford private school, then the message is basically fuck you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's our education system, which is a big part of what needs to change. What about healthcare?
Okay, well, if you thought that things were bad during the pandemic, now, like, I think the CAQ has a huge share of the blame here. The CAQ never really, they voted against a public inquiry into their handling of the pandemic, and we had more deaths per capita here than I think anywhere else in Canada. We have a bad healthcare system, but they didn't create the bad healthcare system. Two very important things happened over the last 30 years. One was the reforms of Gaétan Barrette. He was the last Liberal Minister of Health. Or at least the last major one. And his whole reform was we're going to eliminate a bunch of managerial positions and we will create efficiencies. And what that ended up doing was thousands of people left the public health system, went into the private system. Quebec started financing the private system more. And the same thing that we're seeing in school, we're seeing in the healthcare system. If you can pay, you'll be okay. Because the province partially subsidizes private healthcare, you can get private healthcare at a relatively affordable cost point if you have money. But if you don't have money, you're screwed. And this, I mean, it didn't start with the Liberals. It was already bad. Lucien Bouchard under the PQ forced or coerced a bunch of doctors into retiring early. My grandfather was one of those doctors. And that obviously didn't help the system. So, it's hard to talk about the Liberals' approach on healthcare. They haven't really put anything forward yet, but it's hard to talk about it without thinking about how bad things were under the Liberals last time around. We're talking about the mega hospital, the super hospital, the MUHC super hospital, where Arthur Porter ended up being convicted, or he was charged with, and he tried to escape the country, accepting bribes and rigging the bids in favor of SNC Lavalin, this engineering firm, to be the company that would oversee the construction of the super hospital. And they were just really bad. The project was so poor that there was and maybe Justin can cut to this headline, but there was flooding that was so bad when they opened the super hospital that there was I think the term used in the Gazette was rivers of diarrhea-like substance in the hospital. And I mean, things have not gotten that much better since then. So it's really hard to take the Liberals seriously, and I think that's why so many voters hesitate, right? And so I guess what else do they have going for them, right?
Yeah. And the CAQ has spent the last 8 years kind of centralizing healthcare as much as possible, most recently with creating Santé Québec, which when you talk to healthcare providers has had some unintended, unfortunate consequences. Is there talk of breaking up Santé Québec or
Really, I think there's a reason why Milliard, the big ideas that he's pitching is I'm the only Federalist. I'm the only true Federalist you can vote for, which is not a surprise to anybody. The Liberals have always been Federalists. This is not new information. And promises to help save the French language. These are all promises that have nothing to do with healthcare and education because they're very, very, very hard and controversial topics. And if you don't tread carefully, you're going to end up stepping on a rake and getting it in the face. I don't know if you've ever done that. When I was 10 years old, I did that just to see what would happen. I was too embarrassed to cry to my mother about it. My nose was covered in blood. But that is neither here nor there. What I would say about the CAQ's approach on healthcare is that they're also guilty of electoralism, right? They're going to give doctors a huge bonus if they can accept X amount of new patients before the election, so that essentially the CAQ can say, look, all of these Quebecers have a family doctor. And what's really happening is that a doctor who has all of these extra patients can't clone himself or herself or themselves. They basically, you'll just be waiting longer, right? You'll book an appointment with your doctor in 2 months, which is not exactly ideal when you're suffering with a medical ailment that needs something right away. So what do? You go to the emergency room, and the whole kind of vicious cycle repeats itself. Yeah. Or you go private, right? You borrow money, you put it on your credit card, you do whatever it is you have to do to get healthcare. But the system is broken, and I don't see any major kind of promises on Milliard's part.
Yeah. Because with each new patient that a doctor takes on, it's also a lot of paperwork that is done. The doctors spend a lot of time doing paperwork, right? Okay, and so how is Milliard pitching himself to Quebecers? You mentioned the Federalist option.
He's doing the Liberal trick of trying to be everything to everyone, right? He wants to defend secularism in Quebec, but he also is he in favor of Bill 21 or is he against it? He's kind of tried to play both sides of that argument, saying look, ultimately in a perfect world that he would stick by the Bouchard-Taylor Commission recommendations for secularism. So that means religious symbols would be banned for cops, judges, prison guards, those kinds of coercive authority figures, not teachers. Teachers would be exempt. But he's also said that Bill 21 is not why he got into politics. And I think this, I don't know that if you're, say, a visibly Muslim voter and you see that the Liberals are not willing to defend you, you're not going to go and put your vote with the PQ, right, necessarily, or who are pretty overtly anti-Muslim. And you're not going to put your vote with or the CAQ, who are also pretty overtly anti-Muslim. So what might end up happening instead is the voters just stay home. And I think probably what I would wrap this on is that Milliard is pitching himself as a new voice in the Liberal Party because he is a fresh face, right? And people don't have a negative opinion of, like, him and Christine Fréchette are two of the only mainstream candidates who have an unfavorability rating under 40%. Give it time, it'll go up. But I think the reason is we don't know who they are. But in Milliard's case, he's been a volunteer with the Liberal Party for over 28 years. The last 28 years for the Liberals have not been scandal-free. In fact, that's probably where the biggest concentration of all their scandals have been. You know, Jean Charest, Philippe Couillard, like these have not been good years for the Liberals. So I have a really hard time, and I think voters also are not stupid. Yeah, you're a new face. Yeah, you're a little bit different. Yeah, you're 47, which in politics means you're young. But what is it about you that's really different? And I think it's important to have that kind of like sobering thought before you go to the ballot box.
Yeah. You always say that the Liberals are always trying to be all things to all people. And so sometimes it can make it hard to form an identity that way. Exactly.
It's just like we are whatever the polls want us to be. And I think that, say what you will about PSPP. His attitude shifts now and again, but by now it seems like he has certain core beliefs that he will not stray from unless the polls tell him otherwise. I don't know. But, that's Canadian politics for you. We don't vote for things. We vote against them, right?
Yeah.
Democracy.
It's shaping up to be an interesting provincial election later this year. So.
Well, interesting is one way of describing it. I think it'll be dirty and horrible, and it'll make us all want to cry at one point or another. Yeah.
After a Léger poll found that 70% of Montrealers are in favor of a bylaw against insulting police officers, Mayor Soraya Martinez-Ferrada said she would support such legislation. The Léger poll was commissioned by the Police Brotherhood, the union representing SPVM officers. The Brotherhood commissions a Léger poll every year to check public opinion on different aspects of police work. This year's poll seems to have been drafted in response to a video that went viral in March, featuring a man making abusive and misogynistic comments to a policewoman at a traffic stop. Martinez-Ferrada told CJAD 800 that she's in talks with the Brotherhood about a potential bylaw, though she says she has some concerns, like the possible burden on our justice system if people were to contest the fines they receive.
My worry is on making sure that whatever we do is very clear that will not be you can be able to contest it in court. If you do that, we're going to be swamped in the court, and that's not what we want.
For the bylaw to not be contestable, it would have to comply with our Constitution, which guarantees freedom of expression, including our right to say mean things to other people. We can't assess the constitutionality of a bylaw without knowing the exact wording and how it would define an insult, but drafting an anti-insult bylaw that would be constitutionally compliant sounds like quite the undertaking.
So why can't we insult cops?
Well, technically, legally, you can insult cops. You can insult anyone. It is a crime to insult, not a crime to insult. It is a crime to threaten people, including threaten police officers. But there's a difference between insulting someone and threatening someone. And it's also already a crime to hinder the police's carrying out their duties. So
I think it's telling that she announced this on CJD 800, right? This is very much the CJD 800 mayor, right? You're catering to an audience of people who vote. You don't want to appeal to everyone. You want to appeal to the people who are angry and they go to the polls no matter what, and they're always voting. And I think that is very much the 70% of people who don't want the police to be insulted. But is there also a danger when you're so focused on these issues of stepping into a pile of shit? I know that, this video was shocking. It's horrible. These things that were said to this police officer are totally unacceptable. It should not happen. But I remember in Denis Coderre's it's the only term. It felt like two terms. I remember Denis Coderre would often do something like that. He would react to whatever was in the news. So when Stephen Harper wanted to ban home delivery, we're actually going to do that under Mark Carney. So I guess, history, yay. But when Stephen Harper wanted to ban home delivery, Coderre showed up with a jackhammer. And he destroyed one of those community mailboxes, right, to make a big publicity stunt. And he did this, and it was very popular. And then a pit bull tragically killed someone. And he decided that he was going to react to that news by with new legislation, and it ended up blowing up in his face. I don't necessarily think that this would, but it strikes me as the kind of project that like won't really do anything and might end up just costing them a whole bunch of headaches down the line.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that that's kind of, okay, so yes, there's 70% of, 600 people who responded to this poll who said that they would be in favor of this.
That's a very small, I mean, I know it's Montreal, it's not the entire country or province, but that's a small sample size.
It is, yeah. And then, so obviously you have to kind of think about like who tends to fill out these polls, right? So is that really representative of, the population of Montreal, right? But suffice to say, just because a political measure is popular doesn't mean that it's like possible to do in a way that actually like doesn't infringe our rights. And that's kind of the big question mark for me about this bylaw, is like she's saying that she wants it to not be contestable. So then therefore you have to make sure that it in no way butts up against our constitutional rights, right? And how are you going to do that? I don't see a way to phrase that in a way that is possible. So we're talking about this potential bylaw right now. I think that I could agree with you that like I don't see it realistically actually materializing. Yeah. But sorry.
No. It's one of those things where like maybe it's like a lot of things in politics. Do you really want to pass this bylaw, or do you want to have a conversation about passing this bylaw? And which, you look like you're in control, you look like you're taking action, like you're doing something productive. Yeah. And it's a lot easier to pass a bylaw that's this popular than it is to like fix the aqueducts or
and do you like, I think there maybe some of the reasoning behind it is also wanting to be seen as being listening to and open to like what the police brotherhood wants, right?
Because they're a major political force.
Exactly, right? Like we saw with Valérie Plante. Valérie Plante tried to be even just like somewhat critical of the SPVM, and the Brotherhood came down on her. Oh man,
they
really
declared
hard.
a fatwa on her. It was intense. I remember the time she was reelected, they did everything in their power so that could not happen. They still lost.
Yeah. So I wouldn't be surprised if for Ms. Martinez Ferrada, the like calculation here is, I'll just kind of I'll show the police brotherhood goodwill that I'm willing to engage with what they want, but I don't know if it'll actually kind of.
Well, in the States and probably here too, but I've heard this referred to as like the permanent campaign. You're constantly campaigning. Are you governing, or is this a campaign thing? Is this something to win you more political support? And the problem with that is that campaigning is not governing, right? Like this law ultimately would affect almost no one, right? It's not. Police are not being hurled, like having abuse hurled at them at that level every single day. I mean, if they were, we would see it. But we're not seeing it. And I think the reason is because most people are actually quite reasonable beyond, complaining or trying to like talk your way out of a ticket. Most people are pretty afraid of and respectful of the police. I mean, it's Montreal. We set cop cars on fire when the Canadiens beat the Bruins in the playoffs. But 70% of the people polled also are against insulting police. So I really don't see who this is for and how it actually does anything politically, except confirm, as you just said, the position of power that the police brotherhood have to set the political agenda. Yeah. And their interests are not always our interests. The majority of Montreal police don't live on the island. So really, who's benefiting from this kind of like outside paramilitary force that does policing in our cities?
No, for sure. Like, I don't doubt that police do sometimes deal with insults and like we mentioned,
it's not a volunteer position though. Like, it's not like they're doing it out of the goodness of their hearts. I'm not saying, like, I'm sure everyone who signs up wants to help their community, but you're getting paid for it, and you're getting paid well, and you have a good public pension and all of that. So I mean, it's to me, it's one of those. Why are we doing this? Oh, because everything is politics.
And, we have studies that show that, the amount of abuse that nurses receive on the job is just like, I think that, if we I think that the issue of like insults on the job, I think there are other jobs that are quite frankly just
the parking attendants. I would imagine they eat shit.
A lot more susceptible than police officers, quite frankly. And so, why put the attention on police officers when, I think that there are other nurses, call center employees who deal with a lot more shit.
Yeah,
frankly.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is the police tend to align themselves with the business oriented political parties. So that wasn't Projet Montréal. It's very much, this was Denis Coderre's party, right? And so also weirdly, the police didn't like him very much either, but I think nobody likes him very much. With my apologies to Denis Coderre.
He unites us all in that one thing,
We all agreed you will lose all the elections that you're in now, including the Liberal leadership race, which anyways, good old Denis Coderre.
Yeah.
I wonder, like, moving forward, how many more kind of pet legislative projects this administration is going to adopt, because I think the challenge of governing Montreal is just, I mean, it's insane. It's hard. It's we had like a lefty mayor for the last 8 years and the cost of housing still doubled. So we'll see.
Yeah. Well, it's easy to float an idea like this, an idea of an anti-insult bylaw. Creating it, wording it in such a way that is like feasible is a whole other, like, that's a very delicate needle to thread, right? And then, there's one concern that we didn't bring up that I think is important to bring up is like, who would this bylaw be used against?
Oh my God, overwhelmingly minorities and people of color and the poor and
people who are already over-policed.
And it's weird because, like, the police anywhere in North America, it's like the last true dictatorship is a cop on his corner or her corner. Like they will decide if you're doing something illegal. They can trump up just about any reason they can find to criminalize what you're doing. Or like I remember during a lot of the student strikes and stuff, people were getting tickets for swearing or yelling loud or like things that just, come on, are we really going to put this through the court system, which is already extremely crowded? And are we really going to open this up to legal contestations? And I mean, consulting with like constitutional experts is not cheap. And there are many other things we could be using constitutional experts for in this city. But I guess, again, I'm just a guy with a microphone. I'm not a city councilor.